Good day around the world, everybody. I'm John Ellis, and this is We the People. Tonight, We the People, we're not going to meet Stephen Jaffe. We've already done that. We did that a while back. But we're going to bring him back on to talk about the People's Summit, talk about Dem Enter, Dem Exit, all sorts of stuff going on. North Korea, Trump, what's going on. So we're going to have a good time with Stephen. He's got a lot of perspectives on things. And if you don't remember, Stephen is running against Nancy Pelosi in California's 12th district. And I don't know that there's another challenger at this point, but that's why we're bringing him here. I could find out these things. Stephen Jaffe, thank you for joining us again on We the People.
Thank you so much. It's very nice to be back.
Awesome. So, man, where do you want to start? People's Summit? I mean, I was inspired. You?
I was. Tremendous amount of human energy there. It was quite exciting to be there. And it wasn't until about the second or third day that I began to really sense what we're going to talk about, which is, I've heard people call it a riff, a split. There's various adjectives or nouns that have been used, but we can talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, overall, there was a big positive vibe on the internet about the People's Summit. There were some detractors. There were some people who thought that it really didn't represent a diverse group. There were some people that thought, even though statistically they kept saying there was a large group of minority, it was a very diverse group. There were people claiming that it was establishment driven. And I just find it hard to believe that Bernie Sanders would even associate himself with, I mean, come on, really. I think these people were shit stirrers, quite frankly.
There are always going to be people who find something wrong with everything. That, from what I could see, and I walked around the whole place for 3 days, that was an extremely diverse group of interests. They all didn't get along with each other. And the notion that it was establishment driven, I have no knowledge, or sound like a congressman now. I have no evidence that was true, and I find it very difficult to believe that there was any establishment money behind an event which truly was spending most of its time bashing the establishment.
Right.
So
exactly. I mean, I mean, honestly, I've never met Roseanne DeMoro, but I feel like she's kind of our national mom, and I'm going to trust her judgment. I'm going to trust Bernie's judgment if they're willing to be there. And National Nurses United is willing to be there. Sure, there's big union money there, but that's okay. I mean, that's what they're for. So I thought that was great. Before we play this clip, we're going to talk about Dem Enter, Dem Exit, because we've got a clip of Roseanne right after Bernie's speech where somebody shouts out, draft Bernie, which you're familiar with the draft Bernie group, right? And
yes, I am.
Yeah. Was Nick Brana there? I don't even know if he was there. Did you meet any draft Bernie folks while you were there?
I have friends who are draft Bernie folks. I don't think they're as high up as Nick, but I'm quite familiar with that group. And I actually wrote a note on my website, or a blog, or an essay, whatever you want to call it, about the split here. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. It's on my website.
No, but we'll get a link to that and drop it in chat. That'll be great.
Yeah. I have some pretty strong opinions about what's going on. So is now the time for me to
let me run the clip.
That?
Let me run the clip, and then you can just dive in. And I do want to say to everybody out there, hi, chat. I forgot to say hello. We have the lovely Laura Livengood with us, who is our comment moderator. And when we take a break here after getting Stephen's opinion on this whole thing, we're gonna take your questions, and Stephen's gonna be forced to answer them right here live. So have some good ones, okay? All right.
Okay.
Here we go. Thank you, Laura.
All right, we're going to do a few questions, but I want to thank all the draft Bernie people. I'm with you.
Are you?
You're here. I'm good. Thank you. Nurses, are we with them?
Oh, wait, no, wait. There's more. This is better. Hang
Are
on.
you all with us? Just saying. I always say heroes aren't made, they're cornered.
That's it right there. So do we need to corner Bernie Sanders?
I guess it depends on for what. Uh, do we need to corner him in 2017 for 2020? No.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that are going to happen between now and 2020, and the world's not going to look the same in 2020 as it looks right now. So I don't think that's something that needs to be on the front burner right now. No pun intended.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't need to worry about. But the whole Draft Bernie movement is really about him saying, "I'm done trying to work at all with the Democratic Party." I mean, he kind of is done. The Unity Tour was a joke. He's doing other events that they're not really being associated with. He's basically said, "I'm not really with them. I'm trying." So where do you sit on this? I mean,
all right. So here's my impression of what I saw at the People's Summit and where I sit. The party now, or the progressive wing of the party, is really divided roughly down the middle into two camps. And as far as I'm concerned, they are both equally sincere and equally convinced that they're right. There's one camp that is the draft, you call it the Draft Bernie camp or whatever, that wants nothing to do with the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
They feel the Democrats are as corrupt and evil as the Republicans, and the only way to fix the world or the U.S. is to form the People's Party or some kind of third party and run the right candidate in that party, whether it's Bernie or anybody else. There's the other half, which I am part of, that feels the Democratic Party. I mean, the metaphor I use, it's a bus that's being driven by the wrong drivers. And
there you go.
And it damn well got almost or completely driven off the cliff in 2016 by the Clintons and Wassermans and Pelosi's of the world. And what it needs, the bus is not broken, but it needs new drivers, needs to get back on the right road and return to its mission of representing the working people and the unfortunate people of the world, and return to its original values, which go all the way back at this point in time to about FDR. So I am of that. I am running as a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole life. I don't think the party is irreparably broken, but it sure as hell needs to be fixed and drastically fixed. And I have some ideas about how to do that.
All right. So you strongly believe in, and I'm with you there. I don't think it's practical to use a third party because I really think the people that are screaming third party have no concept of what it would take to form one in enough time to actually do anything. You know?
No, if you formed a third party in 2017, you would be, I think, 2 or 3 presidential election cycles out of really making a difference. And I happen to know, and I wish I could tell you how I know, but I am sworn to secrecy. But I know that I'm quite serious. Bernie is not interested in heading a third party. He is just not interested in doing that.
No.
And if he's drafted, he's going to sound like Lyndon Johnson. If nominated, I will not run, and if elected, I will not serve. You'll hear some kind of a speech like that.
Wow.
So I don't think Bernie is their candidate. They want to start a third party. But again, the people that I know, and I have good friends in the Draft Bernie side, they really believe it. They're not just shit disturbers, if you would. They
Right.
really believe they're right and we're wrong. And I respect their views and I respect their right to that belief, but I disagree.
I do too, and I haven't. We were trying to have Nick Brana on to have a conversation about it, but they basically said we're vetting you because we don't want to get into an argument with you. That's a paraphrase, right? Because I'm not pro Draft Bernie. I'm willing to listen to the arguments, but I have one question for Nick and crew. What are you doing while you wait for Bernie? You doing anything else for democracy in the meantime, or are you just?
Yeah, and what is Plan B?
Right.
If it's not Bernie, who is it?
Right.
Who's it going to be?
Right. So you said I mean, I'm with you right there, and I've taken more of a personally. This has taken me 2 years to reach the same point. You know, for a lot of people that have been there for a long time, like Bernie, I have to be active in my own government. I have to take back control, whatever I can, in my local government. And that's really, I think, been Bernie's message from the beginning. What do you think? What do we need to do?
Well, I agree being active in your local government, but I'm going to talk about being active in your own party, because I think the key to fixing the Democratic Party, I sound like Captain Obvious here, is to fix the Democratic Party. And I would propose, and I do propose, abolishing superdelegates. They're evil and they are undemocratic with a big D and a little d, and they really obliterate legitimate primary votes. You know, when you're a Democratic voter and you go to a state primary and you vote, you have a reasonable expectation that your votes are going to count. But now the DNC is taking positions, even in front of judges in courtrooms in Beck's lawsuit down in southern Florida.
Yeah.
They're saying not only are we can we fix primaries and make backroom deals, we have the right to do it. And they're making that speech to a judge, and they're going to lose. But they seriously contend that they have the right to fix the votes. Well, if you're a voter and you voted in a primary, you know, why would you bother to ever vote again in the Democratic primary if they're going to take your vote and go mess around with it in the back room and change the deal and steal a nomination, which is what happened in 2016. So that's the first way you fix the party. You get rid of the superdelegates. The trickle-down effect of what happened in 2016 happened in California about a month ago at our state convention when Kimberly Ellis, running for the state chair, got robbed of the election by another guy. Doesn't matter what his name is. and
what's his name?
Yeah. And when she asked for, look, I disagree. We're 62 votes apart. Let's get an independent audit to see how this really came out. He refused. The state chair, the remaining state chair refused. And what are they hiding? Who is against an independent forensic audit of a vote that's disputed? That was a rhetorical question.
Well, right, and that, yeah, I mean that was the end of the story. It's like we're in power, and that's the end of it. It's like, really?
Yeah, it's the same argument being made by the DNC lawyers in the Florida case and nationally. So I think if we get rid of these archaic rules and conventions and these arrogant notions, I think the party is fixable. We get rid of superdelegates, make primaries count. I'm not too crazy about caucuses because I worked for Bernie in the Nevada caucuses. They were just unimaginably chaotic. You cannot imagine. And I think we should get rid of caucuses. They're not controllable and they're too easily tampered with. And I think if you want to have a primary vote and count the votes.
Agreed. No, I'm with you right there. You talk about replacing superdelegates or getting rid of superdelegates, but really, in order to do that, we have to have people in the right positions of power within the Democratic Party, right?
That's right. And the way you get that is you elect people to positions of power, whether it's Congress, Senate, governorships, and their power will percolate up to the DNC.
Exactly. They
are the party.
Well, Nancy Pelosi is a pretty powerful person, right? Within the 1%, the corporate Dems, right?
Well, yeah, that's a good distinction. She's powerful, but with who?
Right.
Who is she powerful with?
Right. Is it really?
Who are her followers? Because as you know, I'm running for her seat, and I can tell you who are not her followers, which are the constituents here in San Francisco. I don't know what it was like in 2016. I only know a little bit, but I can tell you now, in 2017 and forward, I have looked very hard, and she is really disconnected with the people who live here in San Francisco. I think she views her constituency, or has forgotten that her constituency is the 12th District of California. It is not the United States of America. But she's all over the country raising money, and she needs to remember the people who elected her live here. And they don't share her views and values on a whole variety of issues.
Absolutely. We're going to move on. We're going to move into California, Nancy Pelosi, and SB 562, the single-payer bill. But first, I want to see if we have any questions. Laura Livengood, what's going on with the chat?
quite a few things. A lot of people are talking about election fraud, and I think we should probably just go straight to there. Several questions along those lines. How do we address election fraud? We've got a perception here that the DNC chooses, selects, and fixes elections. And where's our leverage to make a difference and change that truly?
Well, if you're talking about primary elections per se, then they're a lot harder to fix than, let's say, caucuses are.
Mm.
I'll take California, which I know best. California runs primary elections, but they are, I guess for lack of a better verb here, they are administered by the government. In other words, they are conducted here in San Francisco, they're conducted by, and in the state, they're conducted by the county clerks of each separate county.
Mm-hmm.
So there's government involvement, and it's harder to mess around with county clerks than it is with a caucus, which has no government involvement whatsoever. And that's just a Wild West show there. And someday when we have more time, I'll tell you the horror stories of what I saw in Nevada. But I think that we tighten up primary election procedures. We get private voting machine companies out of business. There's no reason private companies need to run voting machines. We tighten up the cyber and digital aspects of it, which have been, of course, in the news for the last few months. And I think that is the way to do it, so people have greater confidence in the elections. But the way the DNC messes around with it is it ignores the election results. It goes in the back room, as they readily admit, and they fix it. They rig it. And that's got to stop.
Right.
And that comes from within the DNC, from within the Democratic Party itself.
So we're back to the people at the top that we need to displace in order to set things right, really.
That's exactly right. You're back to the local politicians, your congressmen, your senators, your mayors, your city councilmen, who have influence on who becomes delegates to the convention, and the convention has influence on who becomes members of the Democratic Central Committee, the DNC, Democratic National Committee, and it's the DNC and the members that determine the rules of the Democratic Party.
Right. And all of those roles, all of the roles you just mentioned, those aren't big roles. I mean, some of them, sure, mayor and whatnot, but city council and committee member this, and those are local, county, those are city level roles, correct?
Absolutely. School boards, water boards, library boards,
Yes.
dog catcher. I mean, you name it. You should do it. And that's how people always ask me, young people, how do I get involved? I said, run for office, run for student council when you're still in high school, run for the city council when you turn 18, be a young voice on the city council, run for the school board, run for the community college board. That's how people get involved and move up as things go. And
I want to take that one step further. Even if you wanted to have a third party, even if Bernie said, okay, let's do it, you would still need to take all those roles. And now you're trying to do it under a different name.
That's right. And you'd have, and not only that, you'd have the Democrats and the third party competing for a long time for the same votes.
Yeah.
It would take essentially a generation to change it over.
Yes. Do you think it's easier to control the vote in terms of keeping it from being rigged in smaller local elections? Or do you think it's easier for them to mess with it at that level?
Well, the smaller the numbers are, the more difficult it is to mess around with them, because it's the misfeasance and malfeasance is more easily seen.
There you go.
When you're dealing with very large numbers in computers and software, it's easier to hide things. Obviously, hand-counted paper ballots are very difficult to mess around with. And if we all went back to that and were willing to wait a few days to get election results, then that would go a long way towards eliminating election fraud. But people aren't that patient. So.
Well, people aren't that trusting of technology either. I would rather see it go to blockchain, but I would be okay with paper ballot just for that fact. I'd agree with you there. Laura Liveligood, any other? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
It just, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
It just occurred to me as we're sitting here that there should be a federal election fraud law that covers all the states. That if I get to Congress, I'm going to think about trying to put together some kind of a law that the states have to follow to assure their own citizens that their elections are fair and not being rigged.
I think that's
Amen.
excellent.
That raises a lot of 10th Amendment issues and states' rights issues, but I still think it can be constitutionally done.
Well, and if everybody is not aware, Stephen is a lawyer, so he can write that stuff.
You can
Right?
do it.
You actually know how to.
I don't know if I can write it, but I can think it up.
No, that's good enough. It's good enough.
Yeah.
All right. Laura, any other questions?
That's terrible. I'm going to go a different route. Melissa would like to know, what was the tipping point for you, Stephen, in deciding to run against Nancy Pelosi? Was there a particular event?
Well, I'm running against Nancy Pelosi, not because I detest Nancy Pelosi, but because this is where I live. So if I want to run for Congress, this is where I have to run for Congress. But what tipped me to running, it was kind of 3 steps. First, I was tremendously inspired by Bernie. He really resonated with me. And I worked very hard for him. I gave him a lot of money and went to Nevada, as I said. So that was kind of the first push. Then I got, frankly, very angry and outraged when I felt the nomination was stolen from him by all the stuff that we're talking about right now, the superdelegates and the shenanigans in the back room. And then, so first it was inspiration, then it was, anger and outrage. And the third step was horror on November 9th, when I wake up and Donald Trump has been elected president. So I was horrified and just incredulous at that. And I remember one of the things Bernie would always say, get involved, do something, stop talking about it. So that's kind of what pushed me over the edge. I thought about it for a while and decided in about February and announced in April.
Awesome. Thank you.
Right on.
Anything else, Laura?
Back again to getting rid of superdelegates. What's our process for that? How can we address that?
That is probably one of the easiest things to change. It is simply a matter of changing the internal rules of the Democratic Party. And the way that's done is by electing delegates to the National Convention. And once they're elected, they go there and you make a motion on the floor and you have a big floor fight. And then you elect people who share your view to the DNC, and it happens. There's no government involved in eliminating Democratic superdelegates at all. Does anybody remember how they came about?
No, but I was just saying we watched this happen last time. We just didn't have enough delegates on our side,
Superdelegates came into existence in 1972 when a guy who was like Bernie in the sense he was an outsider. He was anti-Vietnam War, very strong, named George McGovern.
Oh, yeah.
And he gets nominated over the protests of what we now call the elitists and the establishment.
Huh?
So after McGovern's nominated and gets trounced by Nixon, the Democratic elitists, they get together and they say, we can't let this happen again. How are we going to beat somebody like this if it happens again? So we'll make up these superdelegates. We'll put enough delegates into our hands that we control, that can't be voted in by primaries, that we control. So they put in this superdelegates device in 1970. Was it three, I think? I'm not sure of the date. And they've been sitting there and no one's really noticed them until, sure enough, after McGovern, it happens again. And this time his name is Bernie Sanders. And they said, we can't let this guy get this nomination away from us. In this case, us being Hillary and Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So they do the same thing. They use the superdelegates and they deny Bernie the nomination because of the superdelegates. Right. That's where the superdelegates came from. And I don't like them and they got to go.
Agreed. and we just need more delegates. We had a lot of Bernie delegates at the last convention, but not enough to change the rules, right?
Not enough to change the rules, but if there'd been no super delegates, I don't know if she would have gone over the top on the first ballot, and who knows what would have happened.
Right, right. I agree. All right, we'll come back to questions in a little bit. Thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
I want to talk about single payer, what's going on in California with SB 562, because, I mean, it went from House to Senate to Assembly, and then it got stopped there by Speaker Rendon. And the narrative is that Rendon says, well, you guys didn't put the money into it, and I just want to put it on hold. We all know it's just a corporate Dem tactic. And we've all seen the figures. We know that single payer would actually save California money. So my question to you is, why are they talking about money when it seems like there's a whole bunch of money there if we implement this plan? What's the problem here?
The problem is that some Democrats in the state legislature, just like in the national legislature, are not Democrats.
Right.
They are what I call Dinos, D-I-N-Os, Democrats in name only. They
Yes.
are really not for single payer, but they don't want to say so because they know that their constituents are really for single payer.
Right.
So they look for pretexts and excuses to go against it. This one about no funding mechanism is nonsense because there are many bills that are first passed in principle and then the funding mechanism is later added to them. And to sidetrack the entire bill is throwing out the baby with the bathwater here. You've already made progress. If the Assembly had taken it up and passed it, then there would have been a conference between the Assembly and the Senate, and they would have worked out a funding mechanism. The bill would still be active. The rumors I've heard are that our dear Governor, Jerry Brown, who says he's a Democrat, he instructed Rendon that, look, I'm not going to be a Democratic governor who's going to veto a single payer. So I want you, Rendon, I want you to stop this now because I don't want to see that bill on my desk that I have to veto. So Rendon puts the kibosh on it and some other people. And I find that rumor plausible.
That makes sense.
Because Brown had already rumbled some predictions that he was not crazy about it and might have vetoed it anyway. So I think there's something going on there. I don't know what Brown promised Rendon, but maybe a judicial appointment. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But that otherwise it just doesn't make sense.
No.
There have been big demonstrations in Sacramento against Rendon, and there's a recall petition I heard that's going around,
Yep.
and I don't know what was promised to him, but whatever it is, it wasn't worth it. So
No. They'll all learn that eventually. We've seen this happen before in history, right?
yeah, and 562, which is a statewide single payer plan, even if it was put into place, funded, and fully implemented, if later a national single payer plan came into effect, universal health care, Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it, whatever euphemism name they pick for it,
Sure.
it's likely that the passage of a national law would do what lawyers call preempt any states who had done the same thing. In other words, the national law would essentially take over what the states had previously been doing.
Right.
There are some subjects that states cannot legislate on. For example, states cannot determine their own immigration policy. Some of them have sanctuary cities, but the broader immigration policy, that's controlled by the federal government. Okay? Same thing would happen, I think, in national health care. If we are lucky enough to convince the Congress to pass a single payer and a president to sign it, then I think the state 562 or whatever version of it's there will no longer be needed because the national plan will go into effect.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you think it's Nancy Pelosi said this? I was reading an article about you in Inquisitor, and she said, "I'm all for single payer. It'll never happen."
No, she's not.
It'll never happen. She said,
So-
I'm all for it, but it'll
You
never
know,
happen.
I've been to I went and listened to her about 2, 3 weeks ago in person here at the Commonwealth Club. And if you ask her, are you for single payer? You will get a 5-minute word salad of complete gibberish.
Nice.
Just a long-winded rant. She'll start out by talking how in the 1970s she was pushing baby strollers and advocating for single payer. The 1970s, which is 40 whatever years ago. But if you press her now, she will tell you, no, we're not ready. It can't be done. And I mean, the answer is no, she's not for it. If Nancy Pelosi were for single payer, two things would have happened. One, she would co-sponsor John Conyers' bill, which is pending in the House, for single payer. She
Yeah.
would why hasn't she signed on
Right.
for single payer if she says she's for single payer? The other thing she would have done is endorsed 562.
Right.
She is the leading Democrat in the state of California, along with our governor. Why didn't she endorse 562 if she likes single payer?
Well, I can tell you. I looked at her. I went to her open source information about her donations. And
course.
she takes a lot of donations from these. I guess they're unions or groups. Or not unions. They're groups. From, it says the doctors group and the nurses
Oh,
group.
it's worse than that. She takes donations from healthcare providers, insurance companies, pharmacy companies, which have a very big stake in single payer never coming into existence.
Right. Right.
If single payer came into existence, health insurance companies would no longer, they'd be out of business.
Or they'd have to compete. They would be forced to compete, and the government would be able to charge. I mean, that's the problem. They can't compete, right?
No, not under my plan. Under my plan, they're gone. They're gone.
We don't
single
need them.
Single payer doesn't mean single payer and then competing privates on the side.
Right.
Single payer means just that. Single, one payer.
Well, but now let's talk about that in interim steps. We'll never see it happen in full sweep unless we manage to do a full sweep of the federal government, which would be nice. But if we see an intermediate step, Medicare for all, something in between, do you think something like that would happen in California first? Are there intermediate steps? Do we need to go all out?
There are, but they're putting a Band-Aid and they're not solving any problem. I think personally, and this is not even a legal political discussion, it's a moral discussion. I personally find it immoral for an insurance company or a medical or a for-profit healthcare provider to make profits on the illness of human beings.
Right.
I think it's immoral. That is exactly what a for-profit insurance company does. It makes profits off the illness of people. I don't think that's moral, and I don't think they should exist.
No, agreed. And my understanding is that there was a law where they weren't allowed to profit off healthcare. Is this true? 1970 something law in the United States. Prior to that, things changed.
There are certainly for-profit. I don't know. That's a good question. But there sure as hell are for-profit insurance companies now.
Oh yes.
And if you look at this is another plank of mine in my platform. If you look at the compensation of the CEOs of these monster healthcare providers, they are earning 20, 30, 40 million dollars or more in compensation. One of my planks, and this is a little digression, is to put a cap on these obscene CEO salaries.
Agreed.
Which are just, I think they should be limited to a multiple of the lowest paid worker in their company.
I think Oregon just implemented something along those lines.
Yes, I hope so. But I think that should be national.
Absolutely.
A national cap.
It's
just nobody needs to earn $50 to $100 million a year in salary. Nobody. It's just obscene.
I mean, I wouldn't care if they wanted to make that much money as long as they brought their lowest worker along with them in that equal pay. I mean, really, if you can bring them up to that level, great business you have there.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
And then they pile bonuses on top of that.
Right.
Yeah, of course,
right.
and stock options. But, you're right. What you're saying, the rising tide raises all the boats.
Yeah,
right?
we're supposed to.
But in this case, the rising tide only raises the CEO up.
Yes. So
And his boat.
Adriel is dropping information here in Slack, and I've got this thing on your Twitter. It says, "Welcome to the Democratic Socialists of America." Stephen, you're a Democratic Socialist now. What's going on?
Well,
Right on.
I think everybody is a democratic socialist. If you're a Democrat and you live in the United States, you're a socialist. Um, Medicare is socialist. Um, Fire departments are socialist. Police departments are socialist. The VA is a socialist program. Obviously, Social Security is a socialist program.
No, no.
Anytime you pool the resources of the people to provide for the common good, and the government is helping provide it, that is a socialist economic system at work.
Wait a minute.
So
Don't we pool our resources to provide for the government in general, so that makes the whole thing socialist?
No, because no, there are places where capitalism should be. I think in entrepreneurial areas, to give people an incentive to start up and invent new things, it's appropriate that they get rewarded for taking huge financial risks. That is completely appropriate. But there's other kinds of activities which are uniquely, or which have to be uniquely done by the government. And I just listed a lot of them: fire, police, things like
Infrastructure.
that. Yes, highways,
Nice.
regulation of businesses. In that sense, we are all socialists.
What do you think about
In that
energy?
sense.
Do you think we should nationalize energy if we could do a full renewable grid, or do you think it should go community local?
No one's asked me that before. Um,
Great. Have
no,
fun
but
with
let me think about it.
it. Sure.
I think that the notion of nationalizing energy is not a bad one, but I also think, since the needs of individual localities are so different from one another, that the localities ought to have some input as to how the energy is administered in their city or in their region.
All
That
right.
would be my off the cuff answer.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk a little bit about climate real quick, and then I'm going to see if Laura has any questions from the audience. There's been some pretty nasty news of late. A bunch of scientists put out some new data saying, look, it's much more worse than we thought, and we're going to see some pretty catastrophic events in the next 3 years, and we really only have about 3 years to turn this thing around, or we're not going to be able to. California kind of leading the way and kind of not. Like you were talking about Jerry Brown, I'm a little concerned because he's still happy with fracking. That makes no sense to me. What do you think we need to do with how do we mobilize on climate? Or do you think we are because of Trump?
Well, I don't know if it's possible to give more education than we have. There's some things that people who think climate change is a hoax and a myth, are just sticking their head in the sand or in other portions of their anatomy. A lot of education, a lot of things are obvious. I think we need, once again, it all comes down to the local politics. We need to elect people with more common sense than the people who don't believe climate change is real. We have to be more farsighted than we are now. The fracking issue in California, it's an exemption that was put in there for natural gas extraction. Why?
I don't know.
Why?
It's ridiculous.
Why? It is ridiculous, and that has to be closed. I am anti-fracking. I will add, Ms. Pelosi is not anti-fracking. That's another thing that separates us among many. I think that global warming, it's going to happen. It's going to be inevitable. I don't know how close the wolf has to come to the door here before people understand it, but I certainly will do everything I can to try to educate people and move people towards completely fossil fuel-free energy. That is my goal.
Jerry Brown's statement is that California can't possibly shift that quickly. We need fracked gas to move us because there's too many cars. There's too much infrastructure reliant on oil and fossil fuels in California. What do you say to that?
Well, what's he doing to change that? What is he doing?
Yeah.
What is he doing to change the amount of infrastructure relying on fossil fuels and natural gas? That would be my response.
I don't know. Nothing, to my
Yeah.
knowledge. Nothing.
Yeah.
Thank you. Laura, any other questions from Chad?
Yeah, going back to the healthcare issue, now, given that the nurses who are working so hard to support SB 562, and they have said that they will split off and form a third party if it does not pass, and would you feel split in supporting them or the Democrats? And this kind of question for John as well. This is from Jilly.
Well, I would ask the nurses making that statement, how would they feel if a progressive Democratic majority was pushing for single payer? Would they still split off from the progressive Democratic majority? And I presume their answer is no, they wouldn't, because their ultimate goal is to put single payer in place.
Mm-hmm.
And if it could be shown that single payer could be put in place by electing more progressive Democrats, then it could by making a third party and waiting 15 or 20 years to put it in place. I think the answer is obvious. Elect the progressive Democrats and fix the Democratic Party. It'll happen much faster.
Yeah. I'm with you right there. I'm take a different angle. National Nurses United it's not a one or the other with them. They're issue oriented like Bernie. So it's not like they would create a division on purpose. If they really went out and created a party and worked on that effort, the draft Bernie or whatever got together with that, I guarantee you they would also be focusing their effort on the issue itself. And so in that regard, they would work with everybody else that is also focused on this issue. The concept that this would create another silo and that would create a division within progressives in general, we got to stop that mindset. We got to stop that. We're all focused on the issues, whether we do it from the Green Party or the Dem Party or the new party that Roseanne creates. It doesn't really matter. To me, that's what I don't think whether they did it or not, I don't think it would affect the cause. You know,
right.
That's where I'm at with it, Jilly. Your perspective on it would be that it would be divisive. I think it would just be another option. Right? Anyway, yeah, that's where
Well,
anything else?
I worry about the voter going in the voting booth, and there's a progressive Democrat, and there's a third party progressive third party candidate who essentially share the same views on the critical issues. How is the voter going to decide which one to vote for?
That's up in the air these days. I mean, you could say a larger percentage is probably going to go with the D because it's a trust, whatever, right? They vote with D. But on the other hand, I think you've got more independents in the United States of America than either party at this point.
And would that third party even be on the ballot to begin with?
There's your bigger question, right? That's the bigger question. Getting that party on the ballot to begin with in time is plausible.
Yeah, no. No, I think there's enough people who will get it on the ballot, but I think it will there'll be a lot of problems before it's sorted out, whichever way it lands.
Agreed. Good question. Thank you, Jilly. Any other questions, Laura?
What are the odds that we'll get a debate with you and Nancy Pelosi at some point? And would I love to see that?
Nancy Pelosi has historically ignored her challengers. And she's doing that to me right now. However, I am the first serious challenger she has from within her own party. The last challenger she had was a third party. There's a guy who runs as a Green Party candidate every time against her. But with all modesty, I think my candidacy and campaign is going very well and is going to be strong enough where I intend to make it more risky to her to not debate me than it is to debate me. If she debates me, if I can force her to debate me, once again, with all due modesty, after 46 years of trying somewhere between 50 and 100 jury trials, I would really, really look forward to debating Ms. Pelosi, who is not the greatest extemporaneous speaker you'll ever meet.
No.
How would you do that? The people in chat are wondering. What would how will you make it difficult for her to refuse?
Well, I would talk straight the way I'm talking to you.
Uh-huh.
I don't I don't like to talk in long sentences. And I would just try to speak as straightforward and plainly as I
Mhm.
can, because the two most uncommon words in politics today are the words yes and no. When people
Right.
ask you, do you support this or are you in favor of this?
Hmm.
You'll rarely hear a politician, except Bernie does it, say
Hmm.
yes or no. And I like to say yes or no. So
Yes. Yeah.
do I hope she'll debate me? Hell yes. Do I think she'll do it without being dragged, kicking and screaming to the debate? No.
No.
No. No.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a related question. What do you think she would use against you, or her supporters will use against you as a this was a question from Xander. What main attack do you think they will use against you?
Um,
And what and how should we counter that on your behalf?
I think
Good
she will
question.
probably talk about the fact I've never held public office before.
Okay.
I am not a politician. The highest office I have ever held is I am now president of our little local South Beach District 6 Democratic Club here in a corner of San Francisco,
Nice.
which is not a very high office. It is not a public office. She would try to use that. Um, I really don't know. I mean, what she could attack. I've never been arrested. I've never. I'm an ordinary guy in the sense I've been through tough times, and I have, you know, issues that everybody who's lived as long as I have has. If she starts going after me personally, then I think she will harm herself far more than she will help herself, and especially if she does what most sneaky politicians do, which is she'll never say a word. She'll just have surrogates go out there and take personal shots at me. It'll be pretty
Hmm.
obvious what's
Hmm.
going on. I don't intend to conduct a campaign of ad hominem personal attacks.
Right.
I think there are plenty of issues out there, and I like my position on the issues. So I'm going to talk about the issues.
That's a beautiful answer, because really right there sums up why Bernie Sanders was so popular and didn't have to run negative ads. He was about the issues, and his position on the issues pretty much worked for the people, you know. So you've got that there, because you pretty much follow Bernie on the issues. Uh, so
Yeah.
that's excellent. I mean, I could see negative campaign. I could see money thrown into ads against you. I think all of that would work against her. You know, that's a really tough balance there, because she's not, like you said, her district. She's not really serving her district. So I don't know that.
No,
You know,
she came here and held a town hall meeting. The last time was March 25th that she talked to the voters of San Francisco, and it was not pretty. This was the time that she was asked. There was a wonderful young guy named Trevor Hill who you had to submit written questions so they could be vetted so she wouldn't be embarrassed. Well, he submitted some inane written question. And then when they asked him, okay, Mr. Hill, your turn, he asked her a completely different question about socialism and capitalism. And she just had absolutely no idea what to say. And she finally finished her answer. She said, well, at the bottom line is we're capitalists.
right.
That's just the way it is.
I remember
That's
that clip.
that's what she had to say. And as I say, she didn't do well face to face with her own constituents.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how a debate would be.
It would be. I mean, it would be a slaughter, because she's got, pull the string, get the Nancy answer, pretty much. And if she's caught off guard, she hasn't. No, she makes no sense.
Yeah.
I heard that. We watched that about that. I saw that clip. That was ridiculous. Any other questions?
Yeah. Any thoughts on the upcoming California governor's race?
Um, well, I'm not a real strong fan of Gavin Newsom because I identify Gavin Newsom as one of the corporate elite Democrats who's part of the machine that probably doesn't like my views on a lot of things. In
Hmm.
particular, the lieutenant governor, which is the office he holds right now, is under the California Constitution, the head of the California Lands Commission. And the California Lands Commission has actually is actually engaged in very heated litigation with the city of San Francisco right now over who controls the waterfront of San Francisco. The developers here have tried very hard to put up essentially a wall of luxury apartments and condominiums along the waterfront and blocking views. And the state, headed by Lieutenant Governor Newsom, who's the head of this, is fighting the city, which has voted in a voted referendum prohibiting this wall of apartments and condos. And Lieutenant Governor Newsom has come in and is fighting that, saying, city doesn't have the right to do that. We're in charge. We're the state. We're going to build what we want.
Nice.
So there's a lot of tremendous resentment here in San Francisco over his position on that. And I hope there is a much more progressive candidate for lieutenant governor, and there is one. And her name, what's her name? Gail McLaughlin.
Okay.
Gail McLaughlin is running for lieutenant governor.
Oh, great.
And not governor, but lieutenant governor.
Okay.
And I hope there is somebody like Gail McLaughlin who runs against Gavin Newsom, and not just a Republican.
Great. Maybe we can get Gail on. That'd be fantastic. Laura.
Yeah, she would be a great interview for you.
Wonderful. We only have a few minutes. I want to ask you this question about mainstream media, okay? And then we're going to talk about your song choice and get you out of here, because I know you did that 2-hour Reddit AMA earlier today, and your hands got to be tired. You got to be tired.
And he was walking up and down the Embarcadero in San Francisco all day yesterday.
Were you really?
Yes.
Like a boss,
I
meeting
was.
people.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice. That's
And I-
good.
Nancy doing that.
And I have don't hold your breath for that.
She's
No.
at a fundraiser. She's busy at a fundraiser. No,
Indoors.
I want to bring this up because we had Randy Bryce on last week, and I asked him a question about being on AM Joy Reid, because you guys, I mean, you were on Fox News a couple times. You haven't had the joy of being with Joy yet, but how do you? I mean, here's my honest question. I got two questions. First of all, how are you going to play that line? Because you need the airtime. If you're going to have a chance, you really need to get that airtime out there on MSM so that you're visible. Secondly, can you confront them and still win? Can you call them out on? I mean, we've seen what they've done with the narrative. When you get in power, can you at least do something about it? How do you feel about mainstream media and where it sits?
Well, that's a long answer, but I'll try to
Yes.
give a short one.
3 minutes.
Calling out the mainstream media. I mean, when I was interviewed on Fox, one of the guys tried to bait me there by, aren't you a socialist? He said.
Yeah, of course.
And I gave kind of the same answer I gave to you guys on here. I said, yes, and so are you, and I explained why. So I'm not worried about being able to call people out. I'm not shy on doing that. I think the answer to the longer question is, how do I engage them, is by continuing to build my own campaign, because I'm going to become harder and harder to ignore.
Right.
And it's going to reach a point where it's going to become obvious that I'm being ignored, and they're going to have to start covering me.
All right.
I don't want to pull any stunts or
No.
run down the street naked or anything like that. So I have to do it again on the issues and becoming known for who I am and what I stand for. And I think it will inevitably happen.
Great. I think speaking coherently would just go a long way.
Yeah.
Compared to who you're running against, because we can't even get a straight answer out of her when she's asked a question on the fly. Do you take a few minutes and we're talking about the song. Just tell it. You get stump time. Why vote for Stephen Jaffe?
Because one, he lives here in the district, and that's why he's running here. But more importantly, because the people of San Francisco have a right and deserve to be represented in Congress by a person who shares their values and their views and their politics. That's why. My opponent, Ms. Pelosi, has been there 30 years. She is profoundly disconnected from her own constituents, and it is time for a change so that the people of San Francisco can have their voice heard in Washington in the House of Representatives. That is really the short answer.
Nice.
If you go down the list of issues and compare me to Ms. Pelosi, you will see in almost every case why I am much more representative of my potential constituents here than she is. She views herself as a national figure. She's forgotten the 12th district of San Francisco. I do not aspire to be a national figure. I do not aspire to be Speaker of the House or Minority Leader. I aspire to represent the people of San Francisco.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So the times, they are changing. Bob Dylan, the song you picked. What's it mean to you? I mean, yeah.
Dylan wrote that in the time of the Vietnam War, and there was a surge of you can call it hippies or yuppies or whatever they were called back then when I was young. And there is a similar surge right now, starting with the convention last year in July in Philadelphia and the election of Trump. There is a very strong surge of progressive democratic values coming up. And I certainly can't claim credit for it, just a very, very, very small piece of it. But I think there's going to be a lot of very surprised people in June of 2018 when I finished very strongly in second place or even first place in the Democratic primary. I think a shockwave is going to run through the whole country because this primary that I'm in is more than just a single district primary. It is a national referendum on who's going to lead the Democratic Party into the future. So many of my contributions come from out of state, all over the country. And I'd like to think it's because I'm such a wonderful guy and everybody loves me. But the fact is I'm unknown. And a lot of these contributions are coming in not because people love me, because they want Pelosi out.
Right. That national figure is biting her in the butt.
That's right. That is right. As time goes by, to know me is to love me, of course, and I hope that more people come to agree with my points of view and like what I'm saying and who I am. But right now, it's a surge of we want change. It's a cry of we want change, we want change.
Right.
And I hope I present a viable and reasonable alternative and can be that change.
Awesome. I think you do. You've got a lot of people excited. I agree. You are a true contender. And I remember hearing another interview. Nancy said she loved the competition. So, okay.
Well, bring it on.
Exactly. Laura Livengood, thank you so much for always being our comment mod on We the People. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Laura.
And I'm sorry for any questions that I didn't get to. It was nothing personal.
But if you want to ask Stephen a question, you guys can hit him up in Twitter, right?
Yes.
Or Facebook. I mean, he's pretty active in social media. And Adriel's there to answer some questions as well. So what would you prefer? What do you prefer in social to be contacted if people want to talk to you, ask questions?
Either Twitter is fine, Facebook is fine.
Okay, great.
I also have a website, Jaffe4congress.com is fine. We don't discriminate on which ones we answer.
Great. There you go. And all those links, everybody, are in the description of this YouTube event. Click on them, share them. There's some articles there, other links to pieces, different MSM talking about Stephen Jaffe. Help him. This is what we have to do. If you're not running for office, then you should be helping a candidate who represents you or a candidate that represents the issues that you agree with, right? That's what this is about. It really isn't about party. I saw somebody talking about it's not really about party. It's about the candidate and the issues. And so I really appreciate Stephen being on. You're welcome. Please come back, Stephen, for another update.
John and Laura, you guys are great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much. Everybody, going out. This is we couldn't play that's not Bob Dylan. You could tell. We couldn't go out with the Bob Dylan version because YouTube copyright. I don't know if Bob owns the copyright or whatever. His original version, no. quite frankly, that's fine by me. I'd rather hear Richie Havens sing anything by Bob Dylan.
This is Laura's choice.
Yeah, Laura picked this one. Here we go. The times, they are a-changing, and we can control that change to some extent if we get off our ass. We'll see you next week on We the People. Everybody, we have Paula Jean Swearigan, who is running against a non-Democrat Joe Manchin. Somehow he snuck into the party.
Woohoo.
Peace, everybody.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it, that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone. For the times, they are a-changing. Come writers, come critics, who prophesy with your pen. Keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. And there's no telling who it is blaming. For the loser now will be later to win. For the times, they are a-changing. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you don't